Today has been an extremely busy day of news in the NHL. Tonight we're taking a look at some trade talk and some rumors regarding teams like Montreal, Calgary, and Philadelphia. We also have some more updates on the Arizona Coyotes. We're going to kind of recap a little bit of what we know in case you didn't see the other videos today. And we've learned a little bit more since those videos were put out. So we're going to discuss a little bit about Coyotes Relocation. We also have the results of the NHLPA Survey, getting an idea of what players think about a lot of different things around the NHL. All that and some injury updates, some signings, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here in today's video. Before we do jump into the news, I just want to take a look back. It's kind of eerie in a sense, but looking back at this day in hockey history, on this day back in 2011, the Atlanta Thrashers played their final game in Atlanta. Of course, they were later relocated to become the Winnipeg Jets 2.0. So obviously, just kind of... when I saw that, I was reminded, I was like, okay, and all the talk today around Arizona and the relocation, their final day in Arizona might be coming up very quickly if everything proceeds the way that we've been led to believe on today's report. So, interesting piece of looking back there, a piece of news on hockey history. But let's just dive into a couple more quick updates here in the Coyotes. I do have 2 other videos out today with some other updates. So if you want more of an in-depth analysis of those situations, I'd certainly watch those if you haven't already. But essentially, what we've heard, most of which comes from Frank Seravalli, a bit from Elliotte Friedman, Craig Morgan and his team have kind of weighed in as well. Craig Morgan's typically the go-to guy for Coyote stuff, but it seems like Seravalli and Elliotte have had a lot more intel than he has on this particular situation here. But essentially, we got word that the NHL, along with the Coyotes and the group from Utah and Salt Lake City, the Ryan Smith group, had made significant progress on having the team sold and relocated to Salt Lake City effective next year. Frank Seravalli had said we could get an announcement, no guarantee, but it could come as early as April 18th. The significance of that date is that's the first day after the regular season ends for the Coyotes. So obviously, they'd play their final game, possibly if they do go, at Mullet Arena on the 17th. And of course, we did hear as well that players are getting some information, but not a lot. The league and the team has been pretty quiet so far. They were both asked for comment earlier today, and they did not put out a statement. They declined to talk about it, which tells us that there's definitely a lot to this, that this is accurate information, because before this, when stuff came out, they were pretty quick to jump in and deny reports. They're not doing that this time. Bill Daly did give a statement. He wouldn't confirm or deny the reports, but he did say that they are working very hard and diligently on what's been a very challenging situation with the Coyotes. And that's really about as far as he went. But at the end of the other videos, essentially we talked about the fact that they're making significant progress on a sale. Could come as early as April 18th. Obviously, we've heard that there could be around $1.2, $1.3 billion total cost here for the Utah group to acquire this franchise. Essentially, it would go from, sounds like it's going to go from the Coyotes to the NHL, and then from the NHL over to the Ryan Smith group, essentially, including a relocation fee. That's why the amount is so big. It's not all in the case of quick sale here for the Coyotes. Obviously, Alex Muriel would get paid a lump sum of money. Obviously somewhere near $1 billion or in that ballpark, and he could continue trying to get the land and sort out an arena to get an expansion team down the road. The NHL does not want to give up on the Arizona market. There's just no real appetite from the Board of Governors and everybody involved, all the stakeholders here, to continue at Mullet Arena for another 3 or 4 years. There just isn't in this current situation. And some people would say, well, why did he go ahead with the Tempe situation? It's like, well, that was quite some time ago too. I mean, it's been a number of months, but at the end of the day, that arena situation, I think, would have been a lot quicker. If they would have won that situation, that referendum, been able to move forward with the Tempe arena, I do think we wouldn't be here today. I honestly believe that that situation could have been resolved and they could have got things moving a little bit sooner. But a lot of time has again passed. This land that they want to buy has no infrastructure. It's going to take a long time to realize the vision here. And there's just not any appetite to do that. From what other things we've heard as well, we've heard from a couple of sources, including, like I said, Craig Morgan, Frank Saravalli, Elliot Friedman, saying some of the players may want out. Craig Morgan was actually appeared on, I think it was Spit and Chicklets, he was talking about it, saying that if the team stays, there might be players that want out. And now there's other reports saying that there's other guys, depending on how they all feel differently about this, they may not want to be a part of the team if they move. The players apparently, looking into if they have any rights, and they really don't. All their contracts get transferred to the new group, but there's some players that are tired of playing in this, lower budget arena, and, they don't want to be there on a long-term basis. They were promised, all this stuff, and it just hasn't been able to come together. So Craig Morgan said he wouldn't be surprised if they do stay, that some of the longer tenured players on longer term deals especially, decide they've had enough and they want out. And then, like I said, we've also heard from Elliot and Saravalli saying that some players may not want to go with the team to Utah. They may ask for a trade. They like staying in Arizona. So there's a mixed feeling, it seems like, amongst the group. The other big thing that we've heard as well is that the owner here, Alex Muriel, was not addressed his staff. We've heard like a month ago that there was supposed to be like a meeting to address the future. That's never happened. There's a lot of people around this franchise that I feel terrible for, sitting around on pins and needles wondering what's going on. What does my future hold? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be forced to move if I want to keep it? Is that even an option? You don't know. You're hearing the business you work for is being sold and relocated, and you wonder all this stuff. Like, there's a lot of people that are impacted, and that to me is terrible. And we've heard Craig Morgan and on his, they had a live stream going with his podcast peeps from PHNX Sports, talking about how the communication from the ownership to its people has been terrible. I have legit concerns about, I don't have concerns about the market. I think if they can get the right ownership group, the right arena set up, I think hockey can be very viable in the market there. I do believe that wholeheartedly. I have concerns about this ownership group, though. I mean, if they're the right people to be moving forward here, like I said, this is a new adventure for them, which is why the Scottsdale mayor, who put up all the resistance, which may not really, at the end of the day, may not prove to be too detrimental here. Hard to say, but he said, like, our rookie developer, to do this massive project, he had big concerns, like. Anyways, there's a lot to unpack here. Nothing is a done deal, but it sounds like because the regular season's fastly approaching, Ryan Smith has been really aggressive with his side. This is not new, too. Like, I think the discussions have been going on a lot longer than we all know, because we had heard before that the Smith Group had made an offer around that $1 billion mark around the All-Star break. He's had more meetings with Gary Bettman and talked about this at a greater length than I think a lot of people ever realize. And to me, it's been very misleading from the Coyotes publicly, especially through their social media channels, to be posting all this hope and posting these renderings of this new arena that they're going to build. And even tonight, even just a few hours ago, they posted a video where they still continue their commitment. And part of the video even talks about that they're going to overcome and, all the detractors and people against them. And they flashed a whole bunch of videos talking about them. And they even included, I've seen some of my own thumbnails in there. So clearly some people at the Coyotes have been looking at my content, which I was kind of fascinated by. It's like, well, I wonder how do they actually listen? How closely do they listen? I just thought it was kind of, I didn't really care too much. Like I wasn't upset about it, but the fact that, because it flashed on the screen so quickly that you really couldn't even, if you didn't know whose content it was, you wouldn't necessarily pick up on it right away. But there was tons. It was not just me. There was probably thumbnails from about, 30, 20, 40 YouTube videos. That was a lot talking about their demise, basically. And like I said, I've never been a cheerleader for them to move. I hope people don't think that. I don't. I just want the situation resolved. I want the team to be viable. I want the team to be financially stable. And I want the team to have a proper arena with a good amount of fans in it every night. That's all I want. Whether that's there or somewhere else, that's what I want. I understand being in Canada where I'm located. I mean, I'm not directly in Quebec City or Winnipeg, but I mean, I've been a hockey fan my entire life. I was in a, very formal years, you could say, losing the Jets and the Quebec City team, the Nordiques, even though they weren't necessarily my favorite teams, I've been always a big fan of all the Canadian teams. To see that, I do have a sense of what it's like, and I don't want to. I'll never cheer for a team to move. I feel terrible for those fans. There are a group of hardcore fans. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that there's enough of them. I'm not sure that group is big enough, or at least it doesn't appear that way when you see the attendance and everything. But anyways, at the end of the day, we are likely going to get pretty swift action on this. It sounds like they're working 24/7 around the clock, and it could come as soon as next week. So we will see if this is the end of the Coyotes. Like I said, I have no doubt that they'll go back and try to make it work. But yeah, this is a really real situation. And I feel terrible for all the people that are going to be impacted in any kind of negative way. And I feel horrible for the fans that might be losing their team here. So stay tuned. I will keep reporting on the news and see what happens. One thing that happened last night, for the first time ever, a bit of NHL history. We saw 3 different former first overall picks score a hat trick in the same night. It was the first time that's ever happened in NHL history. Those 3 players were, of course, Steven Stamkos from Tampa Bay. We have Nathan MacKinnon, first overall pick, a member of the Colorado Avalanche, and, of course, the youngest of the group, Juraj Slafkovsky, who's had a tremendous breakthrough season for the Montreal Canadiens. I know last year things weren't looking great. I really had concerns over him long-term as a player, and he's certainly overcome a lot of those concerns and certainly hasn't hit his peak yet. So I think that he's made tremendous progress this year, and it's nice to see him included in a group that had 2 other former first overall picks that are both Stanley Cup champions and had a tremendous success. So that's cool for him to be a part of that. As I mentioned, we also got today the results of the latest NHLPA survey, which obviously polls a lot of NHL players on a variety of topics. A lot of them are about other NHL players, some things about arenas and things they like, don't like. One thing that came up that's been an ongoing thing, I think it's a few years in a row now, most complete player as voted by the NHLPA players that did this survey, Sidney Crosby, and it wasn't close. Barkov was second, but there was a big gap between the two. So Crosby, again, gets that honor. One question was, if you had to pick one goalie, you're trying to win a big game, one goalie, one game, going to victory, who do you want in the net? Overwhelming answer, Andrei Vasilevsky. He's still regarded as the best in the business in that sense. You had to pick one forward, and you need to win that one big game. Who's that one forward you got to have on your team? Connor McDavid, no huge surprise, although based on this year, there's a number of players I think that could be going into that category, but it was fairly a wide margin there in his favor. One defenseman, same category. One D that you have to have in a big game to win, Cale Makar, very dynamic. I mean, Quinn Hughes might have something to say about that, but Makar got bulk of the votes. One question was, one player that you absolutely hate playing against, but you'd love to have on your team. Fairly big margin winner is Brad Marchand. No big surprise. That's the player that I would suspect would be in that category. You need to win a huge face-off in a big game. Who are you taking? The winner was Ryan O'Reilly, but it wasn't as overwhelming. But number 2 was Sidney Crosby. Number 3, Claude Giroux. I think you can't go wrong in all 3 cases. All tremendous on face-offs. But O'Reilly did have the bulk of the the biggest percentage of the votes in that sense. Talked about the Women's League, the PWHL. Asked NHL players in this survey, who's the PWHL player that you most enjoy watching? The overwhelming winner there was Marie-Philippe Poulin, of course, who plays for PWHL Montreal, currently with Team Canada at the Women's World Championships. Hillary Knight was not too far off the mark, but second place, and Sarah Nurse was in third. So all very high-profile ladies doing a lot for the women's side of the sport. One question as well was, what is the toughest arena to play in? T-Mobile Arena in Vegas was the winner in that category. So obviously, teams hate going to Vegas. They find it very difficult to win there. So obviously that's a compliment to Vegas and their fans. PNC Arena in Carolina, number 2. We know the Hurricanes are such a solid home team, and again, solid home crowd. So obviously recognized there. And then, of course, the TD Garden in Boston as well. So they are regarded as the 3 toughest arenas to go into and win. Best ice in the NHL, voted by the players as, again, Montreal, the Bell Center. That's not the first time that's come up as well. Number 2, Rogers Place at Edmonton, and number 3, Canada Life Center in Winnipeg. So the Canadian arena's getting lots and lots of love around best ice in the NHL. Again, no huge surprise in that sense. So it's a lot of interesting responses there, but nothing too shocking on that survey. Some other moves around the NHL, some roster moves and updates regarding injuries. The Minnesota Wild have recalled top prospect, or one of the top prospects, Liam Auger. I believe he's expected to make his NHL debut here, I believe, tomorrow. The Anaheim Ducks have returned Nikita Nesterenko back to the American Hockey League. Columbus Blue Jackets writer Aaron Portzline confirmed today that top pick for the Jackets last year and great rookie Adam Fantilli will not return to action before the end of the regular season. Of course, he's been out for an extended time after getting a skate cut and a big gash on the back of his leg, although he won't be too far off the mark, ready to go after the regular season ends. So even though his regular season play is over, it is still possible that he may go and play for Team Canada at the World Championships. Of course, Rick Nash, who works for the Jackets, is leading the team as general manager, so he'll have a good sense of that situation. It wouldn't be shocking if he joins them there. The Red Wings confirmed today that Andrew Kopp has a broken cheekbone from an uncalled situation that took place in their last game. I know they're not too happy about it. No timeline was given for his return. They'll probably eventually see if he maybe can return with the bubble shield on. I don't know. We'll see. But definitely going to miss some time for sure. They've recalled Zach Aston Reese in the meantime. St. Louis, too, they've confirmed, or I guess it's speculated, not 100% confirmed, but likely based on Blues reporters that defenseman Justin Falk will likely be out for the rest of the regular season as well. A couple signings. We've got a Panthers signing. The Panthers have signed an undrafted player here, defenseman, to our 2-year ELC, European free agent, Mikolas Horaka. He gets a 2-year ELC, as I mentioned. He's 22 years old, from Czechia. He's a monster, 6'6", 230 pounds. So another huge defenseman there that is going to attempt to see if he can play with the Panthers next season. Be curious to see how things work out there. And the Hurricanes continue to get their top prospects signed coming out of college. We saw them sign Bradley Nadeau the other day. Today they've locked up Jackson Blake, one of their other top prospects here, who was taken in the 2021 NHL draft, been playing at the University of North Dakota for the past couple of years. Of course, he was originally taken 109th overall in 2021, gets his 3-year entry-level contract. Of course, Jackson Blake is currently a finalist for the Hobey Baker Award, so he's had a heck of a season, certainly developed a lot in the past couple of years. And of course, he's also the son of former NHL player Jason Blake. So Blake and Nadeau, both under contract, and will be available here to the Hurricanes as they approach the Stanley Cup playoffs. So be curious to see if they get any kind of a role or if they get some ice time and get into any action here before the season's out. But they certainly have a lot of business to take care of. So be curious to see how they use these guys. Lots of talk as well in the rumor section now. We'll jump over to that. Regarding the future of John Tortorella, the Philadelphia Flyers. Of course, the Flyers have had an epic meltdown and fall from grace here in the standings. They, for a large part of the regular season, were what a lot of us called overachieving, and we're holding down a playoff spot. And really the past several weeks here, it's been a gradual meltdown where they lost the number 3 spot in the Metro. Then they lost a wild card spot, and now they're a few points out. This team has lost a lot of games here in the last, like I said, several weeks. They've hit a wall big time. It seems like the team is exhausted. I know the goaltender, especially Sammy Urson, looks exhausted. John Tortorella has even commented as such. And honestly, I think a lot of it is a style of play and the hard work he demands. I think he's worn them out. And on top of that, I think they've just kind of hit a wall. Like when a team's overachieving, eventually it's going to come crashing down. So I've seen a lot of Philadelphia fans and media say, well, turns out the Flyers were kind of what we thought they were in the beginning. And unfortunately, their draft positioning is going to be greatly impacted. So now they're going to end up in that mushy middle, probably somewhere in that 10 to 15 range. Not high enough to probably get any significant luck in the draft lottery because they're only going to miss the playoffs. At least it looks that way, and they could still get in, but it's looking unlikely at this point. If they don't get in, they're going to be, in the last couple of spots that barely miss. So again, not great draft positioning, but at the same time, they've had a good season and they've overachieved and they've had good progress in some aspects, but there's still lots of work to be done as well. So there's lots of, because of the epic meltdown, I guess speculation about the future of Tortorella. Would Philadelphia want to move on from him? Doesn't sound like that's the case. I know based on NHL insiders like Elliot Friedman who've talked to Keith Jones, the president of the team, seems to still be very high on Tortorella. But there was some talk and speculation of whether or not he would move into a different role. I know former NHL executive and coach Doug MacLean, of course, is now basically retired, but still appears a lot on different Sportsnet podcasts, especially the Real Kipper and Bourne show, since he's great friends with Nick Kyprios after a long time working relationship at Sportsnet. He said before that when Tortorella was in Columbus, that at the end of his contract, before they parted ways, that his ambition and goal there was to move into management. And he wanted to go there. So, is that still something he wants to do? They have Brad Shaw and Rocky Thompson on the bench as assistant coaches who both have a lot of experience. Shaw is regarded as somebody who's very likely to get a head coaching gig at some point in the NHL. Would they move Torts into like an assistant general manager type role? I mean, he's not going to be GM, clearly, with Danny Briere being in that role and new to the role of that. Keith Jones is fairly new to his situation. We know that Tortorella has at times gone and sat up with management during games and let his other coaches run the bench. It makes you wonder if that's still part of his ambition and what he wants to do. So I guess we'll see. I don't have any doubt that Tortorella will be a part of the Flyers. They don't seem to have any desire to want to move on from him completely. But I do wonder if a change in role could be had. So we'll see if they do that. I mean, they could look outside for a head coach, but I would think that the most likely scenario is that one of his assistants, most likely Shaw, would be offered the head coaching role. But that's we'll see. He very well could be behind the bench again next year. But that's the speculation front on him. There's lots of talk around Montreal and Calgary, with the Flames. Of course, with the rebuild well underway here after all the veterans they've shedded across the last number of weeks and really dating back to the early part of the season, weeks and months leading to the trade deadline. We saw them move a lot of players. They saw Tyler Toffoli get moved at the beginning of the season. We saw them move Zadorov. We saw them move Tanev and Hanifin and Lindholm, and the list goes on. Guys like Nazem Kadri or Kuzmenko or Mangiapane, are they coming next? Like Mangiapane and Kuzmenko would be fairly, I think, somewhat easy trades to do. They both don't have a lot of term under contract. They both had their moments where they've excelled and proven they can be goal scorers, and they've also had some downtime. So, for players with short term and not too much money, they're not as complicated to trade. So if those guys are players that the Flames decide they want to move, and there's been speculation that both those guys might be in that category, I can see there being a market for them. Kadri would be a little bit more complicated because of the contract, but at the same time, I don't think he's really grossly overpaid or anything of that nature. He's still producing at a good level. You get him back as being a number 2 center on a cup contender like he was in Colorado, I think he could be extremely valuable. And there's lots of teams out there looking for depth at the center position, who it's one of the most important positions around to build a winner. So I'd have no doubt that all three of those players would have interest garnered around the NHL, and the Flames would certainly have options and be able to execute those types of trades and could continue this rebuild. But we don't know how deep they want to go, for one, and from the players' perspective, we don't know their desire to want out either, especially in case of Kadri, who's got a lot more term. The other players don't have that much term left. They might be content to ride it out and try to garner a free agent contract elsewhere if they do want out when the time comes, because they're not far from it. But we'll see. In Montreal, looking at some updates, a couple of updates actually. One from TVA Sports, Tony Marinaro, looking at the fact that he feels that Josh Anderson really needs to go and be moved on, whether they retain half his contract and trade him at 50%, consider a buyout, anything. And if those options, if a buyout is not going to be something they want to go down that road, and if they can't find a trade at all, then they need to do with him what they did with Yoel Armia this season at the beginning of next year, to put him on waivers, send him to the minor leagues, see if he can somehow bounce back like Armia did, increase his value, and then move on from him. But in the case of Armia, he's a lot closer to being a UFA as well. So obviously Anderson's had a horrible season. I'm not sure how much interest it would be there. A buyout would be on the books for a really long time. I believe he's got 3 years left on his contract, so that would be 6 years of some varying degree of cap hit from that contract if they do a buyout. If they can find a trade at 50%, that would be a much better way to go. And I do agree that the way he's playing and the way he's performing, if they can find a way to move on from him and create some extra cap space in a roster spot, that would be beneficial. You could probably make that argument about Brendan Gallagher as well. His contract's been too expensive to buy out. It still might be yet for a little bit, but they need some veterans around, sure, but they need veterans that can perform on a higher level and veterans that can produce more offense, and those guys are just not getting it done in that sense. So would I be shocked if they found a way to move on from Josh Anderson? No, I would not. And the other part of the Habs we want to look at is Eric Engels of Sportsnet. Of course, his opinion on what the Habs are, one of their top things to look at this offseason is to use their plethora of young defensemen and go out and get another impact forward because they need more scoring, whether it be another top young player like they've acquired recently with Newhook or Doc or some type of move in that sense. They have lots of draft picks and they have all kinds of young D. They're not all going to play in Montreal. Like I said, whether it's, Harris, Struble, Barron, Kovacevic, they've still got Logan Mailloux coming. They've still got Reinbacher coming. They've still got Hudson coming. They have a lot. They're very blessed with a deep pool of young, really good prospect defensemen to draw from. They can't all be Canadiens. So if they could move, something from that pool of players to get themselves a dynamic forward would be preferable. They didn't really necessarily go after any specific forward, but we've heard them linked to various other top young players around the NHL. Obviously, if you're going to try to acquire a younger player, most teams are going to want a younger player similar in return that could use and benefit from the same sort of thing. So we'll see. I do expect the Habs and Ken Hughes to be busy, and I would not be surprised to see either of those types of moves. Hard to say exactly which teams they're with or what the returns are, but could we see them using top young D to get themselves a top young forward instead? I absolutely could. Could we see a case where Anderson has moved out to free up space in a roster spot? It's very possible as well, but will be more challenging. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We will keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.